Hey guys, welcome to Capturing Christianity. I am Cameron Bertuzzi, today joined by Nate Sala from Wise Disciple, and his background is actually looking pretty nice right now. We were talking about that before the stream, and he unlike a lot of apologists in the apologetics community, not a whole lot of them care about the aesthetics. And so when I first came across Wise Disciple and Nate's channel, I was like, okay, here's a guy that clearly cares about like making things look nice. And so that was one of the things I was immediately attracted to, beyond like the content. Let me at least mention at the beginning of the stream that what we're talking about is how to be a really good resource for you if you're interested in doing debates, or it doesn't have to be specific to apologetics or anything like that. But I was introduced, as I was saying, to Nate just by browsing YouTube one day, and then this video popped up on my feed that was like debate teacher reacts to. I can't remember which debate that I first watched, and I was like, this is a very interesting concept. Like, here's a guy, presumably a coach or like a debate teacher who's done this professionally, or has been a teacher at a school or something like that, and kind of knows like the ins and outs of debate. And it's going to be interesting to see him kind of like analyze and break down like some of these really popular debates that I've watched in the past, from kind of getting a different perspective on the debate as someone like me who's just a lay person who's just like watching the debate happen, and I'm just kind of thinking, well, he made a good point there, this guy made a good point there, and then in the end I'll just make some kind of like really, really informal judgment on like, okay, yeah, I think this person won. But in Nate's mind, like I imagine a whole lot of different things are happening, because you're coming at this from the perspective of like a debate coach or a teacher, someone who's been a judge in a debate. So before we get into all of that and your background and everything, actually I wanted to give you a chance, because Nate, this is your first time on Capturing Christianity. I want to give you a chance to just kind of introduce yourself to the Capturing Christianity audience and let people know a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. I really appreciate it. And I can't overstate how excited I am to join you. I feel like I've made it in so many ways. Hi, Mom. I just want to thank the Academy and my agent. I'm just kidding. No, I thank you for those kind words. I kind of came up as a public high school teacher, did that for years, and then I jumped over to become a pastor, did that for years. And now I'm at another organization, but it was weird. When I jumped on YouTube, I wanted to try to do something a little bit different, trigger the algorithm. I still don't quite know what that means. And so I just figured, wow, what is something that I can add to the conversation that isn't really being talked about? And so, yeah, I figured, why not just draw from my background as a former debate teacher? Apologetics was a seminal part of my early formation as a Christian. I was an atheist until 30. And so I had a lot of questions, when I first got saved. And so I've always had an affinity for apologetics. And so, just putting all that stuff together has been beneficial. So I thank you. We have a website. There's a ministry there. It's a nonprofit, all that.
Is it just wisedisciple.com? I can't remember. I actually went and clicked on it and looked around. Is that the URL is just wisedisciple.com?
Wisedisciple.org. Yeah.
.org. Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's a nonprofit. I did see that you're a nonprofit, so so that's really good. So
Thank you.
Wise Disciple, you've got a YouTube channel. I've got that linked in the description of this video if you guys want to go check out more of Nate's work, and especially this sort of debate teacher reacts series. I mean, that's not the only content that you produce that's worth watching, but it's I think one of the most unique and kind of makes you stand out, right? Because as I said, you're looking at these debates from a different perspective, and so that's just really cool. So let's start the interview. I want you to kind of give me some background on what got you into being a debate teacher. Was it like just kind of fortuitous, just sort of happened, like one day you were given the opportunity to do it and so you did it, or was it like this is something that you really wanted to do and so you worked at it? How did it happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like I said, I came up as a high school teacher. So I live in Las Vegas. So I taught in Clark County in Las Vegas. And the first couple of schools that I was at were bottom of the barrel. So I don't know if you know anything academically about Nevada and Clark County. It's 50 out of 50. At least when I was teaching it, it's bottom of the barrel out of all states. And then I was at the worst schools in the worst state. And so it's just what happens when you're a rookie teacher. And so I came up that way. in schools that were lower on the socioeconomic status. And I was in my second school in North Las Vegas, and it was announced that the forensics teacher was retiring. And so they put it out in the staff email, and they asked if anybody wanted to take over for her. She's a nice lady. And I was tremendously interested in debates. And so I raised my hand without really thinking about it because I was like, oh, I like debates, but I didn't understand what forensics was. And as it turns out, forensics, it's not just debates. Forensics includes this whole other category of speech. It's funny because I was talking to William Lane Craig about this, where he did both. And so you end up developing different muscles to accomplish similar goals, but it's a whole separate category. I knew nothing about it. I had studied a little bit of philosophy to get my theology degree, and then everything else was on my own time. And so, I took the gig, didn't know a lick of anything, didn't even really know how to teach debate. And I think a lot of the sort of first couple of semesters of teaching really came down to a friend of mine who taught in another school, and he won all the awards. He was at the school that was winning all the debate awards. And he actually sat me down and he became my mentor, and he showed me his lesson plans, and we just went from there. So that's kind of how it happened.
So do you do any debates yourself, or was this more of like a coaching type of situation, or have you done anything on your own?
Never formally did debates in high school, college, nothing like that. Came to it cold in my 30s. And it's funny you ask that, because a lot of people, so what I'm doing now, a lot of people are like, well, are you going to do debates now that you're doing it? And I don't want to go off on a rabbit trail. I am absolutely not going to do debate. I'm strongly opposed right now to debating. And I know that's weird of me to say, but people most often misunderstand when I say this, but I love debate and I hate debate. I love it and I'm wary of it. And I believe that every Christian should also feel the same way. I think right now, don't let me get too far on this rabbit trail here. Right now, we're living in a society, Cameron, that is marked by adversarialism. It's marked by disputation. We are at each other's throats. Tribalism is at an all-time high. There's no real solution in sight, at least at the moment. So in light of that, I actually, at the Wise Disciple, I teach Christians how to effectively communicate where they completely avoid, they bend out of the way like Neo in the Matrix, disputation, in order to do something more effective, which is it's something like gentle cross-examination. So at the same time that I'm doing Debate Teacher Reacts videos, I'm also making videos on the side of effective communication. And then I'm traveling and speaking and training Christians to do that. So I avoid debates for that reason. I don't want to model a method that I do not advocate for in regular conversation, because I think that's a mistake that a lot of us do when we watch debates. We go, oh my gosh, William Lane Craig slayed that guy. Now I'm going to go do that to my neighbor. No, don't do that.
Interesting. Yeah, and I do have a question that's sort of related to that topic a little bit later on. But I wanted to get into kind of the meat here, which is basically for someone who is engaged in debates or thinking about doing debates. And again, this goes way beyond just theology, apologetics, or philosophy, anything that anyone wants to get into debating. What are sort of the top 3 tips, if you wanted to give some tips for someone who is starting to get into this area?
Yeah, that's the $6 million question, there's a deep well of things to say about this. But the 3 things that maybe come to mind are, number one, and maybe this is in no particular order of importance, but number one, I think you have to write your opponent's case first. Okay? There is no way, in my opinion, that you can truly write your own case. And what I mean by case is when you go into a debate, there's a structure to it. And everybody who's debated knows this, and those who watch know this. There is a format that you follow in debates. Well, you have to make what's called a prima facie case, especially if you're in the affirmative for whatever the topic is. And so when you're writing your case, there must be some level of understanding of what your interlocutor is going to say. And in formal debates, especially in high school and college, they would force students to write both cases. And you wouldn't know oftentimes which side you're debating until they flipped a coin. And so you're ready to argue both sides either way, and you don't know until the very last second. So I advocate for that. I think that's probably the best thing that you can do, because part of your opening statement, like within your, sort of the structure of the opening statement, you should deal with potential objections from your interlocutor. And so I would say the first thing is you should be able to write your opponent's case first. I can keep going if you.
Well, I was thinking. I mean, right before we went live, I was listening to your conversation with Dr. William Lane Craig on the same subject. Like, what does he do when he prepares for the debates that he's been a part of? And one of the things he was talking about was, I mean, the preparation time that he puts into these debates, and it definitely, what he was saying is that it differs between the opponents that he's facing. So, like, if someone has written a whole lot of work on some subject, like an atheist professor, and he's got all these articles and blog posts and things that he can consume, then he'll consume as much as he can of that. But if he's debating or talking with someone who hasn't really written anything and doesn't really have a whole lot of material out there, then he can't do that work. But what it sounded like is that he does as much preparation as he can for each debate that he goes into. And that kind of sounds like what you're getting at here, is that maybe it should be obvious, right? It's like preparation for a debate seems like an obvious thing to do. But then, I mean, I've been in debates where I certainly didn't prepare enough. And so I think that is like just a really good sort of fundamental, if we're talking about like fundamentals of some, skill or whatever, this is definitely one of those fundamentals when it comes to debate is preparation. So, and I think that, like I said, William Lane Craig is a huge proponent of that as well. And that's partly why he does so well in his debates.
I agree. I think that, so you asked me three things, right? And I'm still thinking about the other two, but I think all of what I would say falls under the broader category of prep. That prep is key. Like, you need to prep, or else you're gonna, it's not like you're gonna, fall on your face flat and make an embarrassment out of yourself, but you certainly will miss opportunities. I think the reason why people lose debates more often than not is because it's a death by 1,000 missed opportunities. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. And so you need to, that's prep. That's where prep comes in. I think Dr. Craig said that he tries to never be surprised in a debate. And that always comes back to prep. That's true.
Yeah. And he also said, I mean, and this is going to be true regardless, you're inevitably going to be caught off guard at some point, right? Someone's going to raise a point that you hadn't prepared for, and you're going to have to kind of impromptu respond to that. And so that, I think, is to be expected. But nevertheless, I think it's really wise and really good if you want to be a wise disciple, right? You got to do the prep work. And so, I think that's just again, it seems like that's an obvious thing to do. Like, why are we even making a stream where we're telling people to prepare for a debate? But again, like, just got to do it. You have to do that work.
Yeah. I'm going to try to see how many times I can get you to say wise disciple in an hour. So that's just my little metric. Yeah, that's good. Another one, though, is, and again, under the category of prep, framework. Framework is key. I've been talking about this, I think, in every debate video that I make. You need to develop the habit of creating and maintaining a good framework throughout the debate. So what I mean by a framework is, because I think there's different words for it depending on, what generation of debater you are. Because I was talking about Dr. Craig about this, but he has a different word for it. But a framework is basically when you, and again, this goes back into how you lay out the debate. So when you're in your specific segment of the debate, right? So a typical debate is like, and help me if I'm jumping all over the place, Cameron, I tend to do that. But like a typical, the segmentation of a debate is you have an opening statement from the affirmative side, you have opening from the neg. Then you have rebuttal, first rebuttal, then you have rebuttal on the other side. Maybe you go into cross-examination. Sometimes there's no cross-examination. Then there's another rebuttal. Then there's conclusion. That's kind of the segmentation of the debate. In the opening, and arguably in every segment, you should be seeking to what's called advance your position by laying a good framework. The framework is the story that you tell of what the debate is about, how the audience should be thinking through the debate, and how they should judge it. You're the one as the debate opponent. This, out of all the tips, is probably the biggest one. You're the one that needs to tell the audience how to do this, because let's face it, a lot of the apologetics and theology debates are highly technical. They're over the heads of the audience. Nobody in the audience wants to admit that, by the way. But, they'll hear words and terminologies that go over their head. They need help. The way that we all process information and receive it and retain it is in short bites, and also in the form of narrative. So, and this is true of movies, this is true of everything. We learn through narrative. So tell the narrative of the debate. And usually what happens is the one who tells the better narrative, who lays the better framework of the debate, usually wins the debate, whether they even made their case or not, whether they actually challenged the opponent sufficiently or not. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just kind of how it works.
Yeah. So like the way that I view that in the debates that I've taken part in, which most of my debates, I believe, I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot that I've been a part of myself, like me being a debater, but of the debates that I've done, they've been written for the most part. And so like my debate with Rationality Rules, for example, on the Kalam cosmological argument, we wrote all those out and did it that way. And it was just way, in my opinion, maybe we can talk about like written versus oral debates later, but one of the things that I tried to focus on was this sort of framing issue. So like I made a point. I would then, in his rebuttal or his opening or whatever, I would listen to what he said in response to that particular point. And then in the next response that I gave, I would try to summarize his response. So I would summarize my initial response, his response to that, and then I would give my new response. And so that I think, is that kind of what you're talking about here with framing, as far as like telling a narrative throughout the whole debate of like what's going on, so people can understand like how all the different moving parts are fitting together.
That's right. That's right. Everyone needs help. And like I said, everyone in the audience with these kinds of debates, they're laymen. And so they need help. What you're doing is really good. You're seeking to, like, if you think about a debate in terms of like moving forward, point A to point B on a road, the better debater moves in a circuitous fashion. They're constantly circling back around and seeking to move forward in this way. Why? So the audience can follow their framework and adopt it. Because if the audience adopts your framework at the end, you won. So so now we're talking about something else. We're talking about the balance between the balance that somebody has to walk in a debate between logic and rhetoric. So maybe we can go there for a minute, or I don't want to, but logic, obviously the content of what you're saying must be logical. It must be sufficient and adequate to support your contentions, right? And support whatever position that you took on the proposition or the resolution of the topic of the debate. But rhetoric is the artistic expression of the way that you communicate. And so that's what I'm trying to say. When you hear about Aristotle and you track his ethos, pathos, logos framework or structure for rhetoric, that's what I mean. You're doing this. You have to move in this way so the audience stays with you.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I wish there was a better way to put this to kind of like make it land with the audience. But I think if you're thinking like of a debate, I'm thinking in particular of the William Lane Craig and Stephen Law debate. And while I think Stephen Law like had some good things to say in response to William Lane Craig during their debate, I think that he definitely lost when it comes to framing. So what he would do in his rebuttals, from what I remember, is he would just respond to something that Dr. Craig said in his previous speech, but he wasn't going through this process of like summarize his initial point, summarize Dr. Craig's response, and then give a new response. He wasn't doing that kind of like framing of his in his rebuttals or in his responses. He would just say, oh, well, this is why Dr. Craig's response fails. And so he wasn't helping the audience along and getting them on sort of his team, so to speak, and drawing them along, like you said, sort of in this narrative type fashion, where you're just, it sounds like there's a lot of repetition that's involved in good debating, is that you've got to be able to summarize points and reiterate things, and it may seem a little bit repetitive, especially if you're the one doing the debating. I mean, there's even times when I'm actually working on a debate right now. It's completely written. We just got to film and put it out there. But there were times when I was like, because we had word limits on our rebuttals and everything, and so I was like, I don't really want to use the limit of my words summarizing things that have already been said. Like, I just want to respond to the new things that he said. But then I just kind of reminded myself, like, if I don't summarize things, people are not, they may not follow along with what I'm saying here, why I'm responding in the way that I am. And so I think that from a rhetorical standpoint, right, that's kind of the distinction that you're making here. From like the logical side of things is all pure like dialectic arguments back and forth. But the rhetorical side of things is how persuasive you're being, and are you helping the audience follow your points or not? And so, Yeah, I think that is a really key component, and probably one of the reasons why Dr. Craig does so well is because he will summarize things throughout the debate, and that's why it kind of seems like he's winning, is because, oh well, it sounds like, yeah, like Dr. Craig made this point, and then he responded this way, and then, oh, okay, so here's the new point that Dr. Craig is making. That makes a lot of sense, and so it just kind of flows in a really good way. I don't know if I'm adding anything, but
no, totally. I mean, if you watch, so Dr. Craig is one of the strongest I've ever seen debaters. The reason why is he's almost, oh man, I don't know if this is a bad way of saying this, but he paints by the numbers. He's textbook. He follows exactly what you're supposed to do almost without deviation. And so yeah, in this regard, you'll find him coming back in first rebuttals and second rebuttals and conclusions by saying, now you'll remember that my contentions were, and he'll lay them out again. Now the opponent has not answered my second contention. And so, then I can move on, right? And he does that extremely well. It's a great point.
And that's super helpful. Very, very persuasive as well. So what is your third tip that you would suggest?
Yeah, third, and this is tricky because I've been trying to think. So first of all, shameless plug, if you come over to the Wise Disciple channel and you subscribe, you should expect more videos along these lines, tips and tricks, how to get into debates better, and all of those things. One of the questions that I've been asked is on flow. So this is my third topic, is writing and sticking to your flow. But it's been so hard for me to explain this because I can't explain in words what really can be shown by example. And flow is just basically your note-taking. You take a bunch of notes in the debate so that you can track not only what you're saying, but what your interlocutor is saying, so that you can provide true clash, because that is your goal. The goal of any debate is to provide true clash. And so flow has been really difficult to talk about because flow is a system of shorthand, which nobody knows about in this country anymore. Shorthand used to be very popular, like in the 100 years ago, where you're not writing out the actual, like if I say you need flow in your debates, shorthand version of that is a bunch of symbols in place of the words communicating the same message. And so that's what it is. It's a series of abbreviations, whatever it takes, and it's subjective to the debater. But the bottom line is you need a shorthand system that works for you, and you need to stick to your flow. A lot of mistakes I see with debaters is they don't take the notes, or they take the notes and they don't stick to the notes. Your flow. Oh man, I should have thought of this actually. I don't have an example of it. Your flow should look like a grid. And the grid is based like on a sheet of paper. Your grid should have columns, and each column in your flow, so this is your note taking, should contain certain types of information. Dr. Craig talked about this, I think, in my interview with him. So his way that he does flow, again, it's subjective to the debater, is that at the very first left side of the column, he's writing out his own contentions. Contentions are arguments. If he has 5 contentions that he's making in his prima facie case on the affirmative side of whatever the topic is, he writes that out. He writes that out before he gets to the stage. So that's already written there. The second column is his opponent's response to his contentions. He's writing out his opponent's response there in a form of shorthand, because you got to keep up because people talk fast. And then you have a whole separate thing where, and this became popular and I always hated it, but debaters it's what's called spread. They would spread their words, which is blah, 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 blah. There's like 100 miles an hour they're talking, which is garbage. But you're trying to keep up with what your opponent is saying, and you're writing that down. And then adjacent to your opponent's response to your contentions, you should write down how you're going to respond. And then you just keep going, right? So then you have your various rebuttals and you just keep writing. And then you hold your flow up in cross-examination, because the goal of cross-examination, which is probably the most attractive part of debates for a lot of people, because that's where people get cut and they start bleeding, and people love, all of that stuff. But if it bleeds, it leads, right? So cross-examination is fun, but you're supposed to be sticking to your flow in cross-examination, because cross-examination is all about attacking the contentions that your opponent has made. And so oftentimes you can track this. Cross-examination veers because people, they see squirrels and they start going off on rabbit trails. But that is essentially the third tip that I would give is you got to be able to develop a system of flow and stick to it.
The only thing that I was thinking about during this last tip is the fact that the debates that I've taken part in myself have mostly been written debates. So thankfully I haven't really had to do like this flow chart of like listening to, sort of spelling out every single thing that someone else is saying. But I can see in a sort of normal, oral debate that would be essential to be able to list everything out, because otherwise there's going to be all sorts of things that you're going to miss, and your flow is going to impact your framing, right? If you miss something, then you're not going to be able to summarize what you first said and then summarize their response and then give your next response. Like it's all going to sort of tie together. I was even thinking about how that ties back into prep work, how Dr. Craig would talk about how he'll create all of these different briefs and responses to potential things that someone will say. And so you'll have like a flashcard, or I think he was talking about like he had little flashcards that he would use. And so when in his all these terms are starting to melt together. So in his flow, he would pull out one of his briefs. And so if they made a point, then he would just sort of take that index card out so he doesn't have to think on his feet and put that where it's supposed to be. And so that way it is really like beautiful once you see it. And this is I guess why I can understand in your conversation with him why you were calling this a sort of art. Like this is an art form. Be able to do this well.
It is. It's like dancing. It's like fencing. There's just an artistic expression that's underneath it and all through it. You brought up briefs, so that's really great. Briefs are basically ways of. So let me back up. You should never, if you've done your prep properly, Cameron, even the notes that you take with regard to what your interlocutor is saying in the debate should not come as a surprise to you. So we're never, in other words, we're never stepping outside of areas where we had already given much forethought to a debate so that you're never surprised. What you're doing is when you're writing your note, if you're doing this well, right? And it's a development of training over time. You get better at it. You just keep doing it, right? But when you're writing your flow, that's what I mean. When you provide a response to your interlocutor's response to you, you should probably refer to some kind of brief or pre-written response that you already have ready to go. So I've seen both happen where people will come up and debate and they'll just have a computer, okay? And sometimes it's allowed. Sometimes you're old school and you have like this big old, I don't know, Trapper Keeper, folder, and you have to open it up and it's all differentiated by different segments inside the Trapper Keeper. But the bottom line is you need to be able to reference all of your briefs because, again, you've done your prep work. When someone asks you a particular challenge question in cross-examination about evidence, you made a claim about some kind of evidence, can you cite that? You should be able to go inside your, whatever your system is, and grab it out, quote, and citation ready to go. Again, which is something that I don't often see in theology and apologetics debates is somebody like James White will do that quite a bit because that's what you do as a debater, especially in cross-examination. Well, can you cite for me an example of what you're talking about? And more often than not, people don't have those things ready to go. So it all comes back to flow, and your flow should always stick within your prep, and you should know how to navigate where you're going. You should never be surprised.
Let's switch gears a little bit. And now, instead of talking about tips, what to do in a debate setting, what is like the number one pitfall or like common mistake that you see made by debaters?
Yeah. I mean, I might have said this already, but I do believe that, first of all, let me back up. I'm coming to debates late. Okay. So it's funny because I only have started doing this really. I started a YouTube channel for Wise Disciple years and years ago. We never did anything with it. I made all of the mistakes that you make as a content creator. Didn't do any. But in the pandemic, as is many people's stories, I was like, man, I got all this free time. What do I do? Right. And that was the first time I started thinking intentionally. So I've only really done this for a couple of years now. What is this, 23? So 3 years. I don't know a lot. When I was a public high school teacher and focused on tournaments, that consumed me. So I was out of the loop. I don't know. People were like, the first request that I had was from the community was, you should do Matt Dillahunty. I'm like, sure. Who's Matt Dillahunty? I have no idea who that is. And anyway, so that's a rabbit trail. But so the point is, I don't know of a lot of debates. I'm still coming to this. People are referencing certain debates that are well known. I don't know anything about it. From the debates, that's all a big qualification. From the debates that I have seen, I think a lot of debate fails come down to a death by 1,000 cuts. There is no huge knockout punch on one side or another when it comes to debates. And that's why one side won. Usually what happens is there are a series of missed opportunities to challenge your interlocutor on something that they're saying, while also at the same time advancing your own position. And it just adds up by the end of the debate. So the biggest pitfall, I mean, I guess if I could characterize it this way, is not sticking to your prep, or maybe not prepping at all sufficiently, but definitely like the butterflies come in, you're in front of, it's something to stand on that debate stage and look out at everybody else. And then across from you is somebody like James White, who looks like he will murder you in your bed. And then you just veer. Don't veer. That's the biggest, I think that's the biggest issue that I see.
Yeah, I mean, I like the point about like it's usually not just one thing that's going to be like the defining factor of why someone lost, but probably like a culmination of a bunch of different little, like you said, kind of missed opportunities. So another question I've got for you is, do you prepare when you were dealing with students? Did you prepare them for the losses that they would inevitably experience? Like, no one has won all the debates that they've been a part of. And there's a lot of emotions that come along with that. Like, I don't think that I've won all of the debates that I've been part of either. So how do you prepare your students? And even if you didn't do this, like, what would you say to someone to kind of just like not let them be so hard on themselves, right? Because everyone's got to prepare in some way for the losses, especially if you want to do this and start doing more of it. Like, you're not going to win every debate that you take part in. So how would you prepare someone to lose, essentially?
Man, that's such a great question. And I feel like I would know now more than I did when I was teaching in the classroom years ago. Because I think in a way what you're asking is kind of a parent question. The fact is that parents are coaches. You know, the older that your children get, you have children. I have two boys. They're 10 and 6. They're over there plotting my murder right now. They're trying to kill me. Somebody call the cops. But as they get older, what your role is as a parent is to coach them and to support them and to celebrate their victories. And so I think it's kind of the same answer. You know, it's you. There's a lot of value in recognizing that you can do only what you can do. This is a process of development of skill over time. And at the end of the day, you may end up going up against somebody who is equally matched with you in terms of prep and talent, or you may go up against someone who outmatches you in those areas. And so then the after effects, right? The debrief, the self-assessment. In formal debates, there's votes, and you're aware of what those votes are, who the judges thought won. And if you lost, I mean, that can be quite a blow, right? But in the self-assessment part afterwards, it comes down to highlighting and elevating the things that you did well, whether that's utilizing your briefs, right? Utilizing them in ways that provided challenges to your interlocutor's contentions. Maybe you pressed your opponents, had a couple of key great moments in cross-examination along those same lines, or whatever it is, right? Highlight those moments, give much praise for that, treating them as huge successes, while at the same time having the attitude of the things that didn't go so well as just opportunities to refine, get sharper for the next debate. We're gonna attack this. This is what they do in boxing, I think, right? This is like, well, you go back and you watch. That's horrible, by the way, watching yourself, do something on video. But then you go, oh, okay, I did not stick to my flow in cross-examination. I dropped certain contentions from my interlocutor that actually harmed me. Next time, I'm going to focus specifically on flow, and I'm not going to drop the important contentions from my opponent. Stuff like that.
Yeah, there's like 1,000 things that I want to say, but they're all, I mean, I'm not coming at this from a place of any level of expertise or anything, but I mean, there are certain things like, I think it kind of comes down to the prep work as well, is that if you can convince someone who is getting into debating to do the hard prep work, then that's another way of like kind of mitigating some of these emotional, the backlash that can happen after a a big loss like that is, you know, go back to your prep work. What did you do to prepare? What are the sort of things that these missed opportunities that you could have capitalized on? And if you can prepare someone, I mean, it may just come down to like how someone deals with criticism more generally, like not just when it comes to debates, but like just in general, if someone criticizes something that you have to say, how do you deal with that in general? Like, are you going to take it personally? Are you going to take it as a sort of learning opportunity? I mean, I think I have a pretty healthy way of looking at criticism, but even then, like, it can still get to you. You know, it can still make you feel like crap and still make you feel a certain way, right? And so,
Right.
Ultimately, I think it just kind of does take some emotional intelligence, and just got to kind of get back up on the horse and realize that this isn't the last thing. You know, and mistakes are okay. We're all humans, and so it's okay to make mistakes. But
Can I say one more thing about that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's key. So now I'm going to speak as a pastor, because what happens when you fail is oftentimes you want to isolate. You should not do that. You should have around you a posse. That's an old school. Okay, let me back up. You should have a crew around you. I grew up in the 80s. And you should have people around you that can help you process. You know, you need that. You need your crew. You need your squad. I don't know what the words are anymore. I'm too old. But that really does help. Isolation is the worst thing that you can do, because then, all the doubts come in and you start really beating yourself up.
I was just going to use the term friends.
Friends.
Your friends.
Yeah.
Okay, so a question I've got is, do you think that a good debater, that's more like natural skill, or a sort of like a natural ability, or a learned skill? You think it's more one or the other, or maybe a combination? Or
boy, there's no doubt in my. So one of the things that you need, oh man, to be a good, it's a combination of various muscles. I'm sure some of the muscles that are required to be a good debater probably come naturally. I can't put my finger on one right now. But what I
Dr. Craig, like, I mean, he's the example. I can just always appeal to him just because, and he's widely recognized. It's not just Christians that think that Dr. Craig is this really good debater. It's like a lot of people think this about him. And again, even if you disagree with his conclusions, you can still recognize. But part of, I think, what makes him so great is he's very naturally skilled at rhetoric. You know, and some people think that that's like a bad quality that he's got. He's too rhetorically forceful, which I can understand that to some degree. But I think that might be one of the ways in which natural ability is going to be very obvious here in a sort of feature or attribute that's going to make someone a good debater. If you are naturally skilled at rhetoric or just speech, you know, in general, and in making yourself sound convincing, like that. If you're naturally gifted at that's great. But again, that is not necessarily something that has to be naturally ingrained. This can also be learned, a learned skill. But if you're just, I guess, I don't want to answer this for you, but I think part of it can be learned, or like skills that you learn, but part of it can be natural ability. But I think that there's kind of play there on both sides of it. So in areas that you lack, you can learn those typically. And this applies, you know, in any area that you're trying to like master and become an expert in. There are things you're going to be sort of naturally gifted at, and there's things that you're going to have to put a whole lot more work into. And I think that's probably going to apply across the board. And so when it comes to debate, you probably just need to figure out which parts that you're not naturally skilled at and work on those. But what are your thoughts?
I would add that there are natural aptitudes to intellectual ability. You know, there are just people who they pick things up easier. You know, I have had to run through. We've all probably done this, you know, in or out of the church, but for teaching as well, you take these aptitude tests. And I think that one of my sort of natural giftings is not so much understanding the heights of academic achievement or anything like that, but my gifting is more in distilling more abstract information in a way that's easily relatable. which is the skill of a teacher. I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But but so there is that natural aptitude as well. But the way that the question is, when you ask me, it seems like what it implies is that you can't. Nobody. There are some people, a subset of people that cannot learn how to debate. And I'm not saying that you suggested that, Cameron. I'm just saying it seems that way, and I would strongly disagree. I think everyone can learn how to debate, and I don't see anyone beginning as children to be naturally great communicators. So there's always this learning and developing the language abilities, the skills to communicate effectively. And if we're all growing to seek an articulation, then we're all learning. I had trouble speaking as a child, so I don't want to divert, but I grew up in and I love my parents, and we've sort of come to terms with this, but it was an abusive environment at home. And that actually caused me so this was too soon for a diagnosis of this sort, I think, when I was my age as a child, but I think it was selective mutism. I just really struggled with speaking. I couldn't. I tried to get the words out, and they would get stuck in my throat, and then I would cry because I wanted to say something and I felt like I couldn't. And now, right, by the grace of God, I'm on the other end of that, and I attribute a lot of that to the work that I've done and the learning myself in terms of articulation, rhetoric, debate. So anybody can, if I can overcome my problems as a child and speak the way I speak now, then absolutely anybody can learn how to debate.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, but I am really happy to see that you've worked through it, and those sorts of things are tough. But one of the things that you were talking about that kind of stuck out to me is that when it comes to like intellectual aptitude, obviously there are things that like some people are just naturally smarter than other people, right? I think everyone can pretty much agree with that. But just because you're smart in terms of like just intellectual horsepower, that doesn't mean that you're going to be very skilled at debate, or that if you debate someone else that you're just sort of naturally going to win. And so I think that kind of shows that there's probably going to be a combination of things or factors that are going to make someone a good debater. And it's going to be a sort of case-by-case basis. Like someone may be naturally gifted at like organization, right? So you just may be like someone who is really hyper-focused on making things organized. And so like your flow is going to work out really well, or your framing is going to just sort of come naturally to you. But other people are going to struggle with that, but they're not going to struggle with something else. And so everyone is going to kind of have to work on individual things that are going to make themselves a better debater, a better opponent. So that's right. I think it's probably like a case by case kind of basis.
And it's a balance. So I mentioned this earlier. In debate, it's a balance between logic and rhetoric. I tend to lean more cerebral. So I struggle with rhetoric. I had a friend, he was my best man at my wedding, and everybody knows somebody like this. When they walk into, they're street smart, right? They hate books, they don't read, but when they go into a room, they own the room. They are so personable with people skills. That's somebody who is way gifted on the side of rhetoric, right? And so it just becomes a balance of both. That's what you're trying to walk in debate.
Yeah. Okay, moving on through some of these other questions I've got for you. So what is, you said that you haven't like watched every single debate, and I think that I would agree with that as well. There was a period, I think about a 2 or 3 year period, where I consumed as many Christian atheist debates as I could at the time, which I think was in like 2012, 2013. So around the time that you started Wise Disciple was around that time when I was sort of consuming a lot of this material. And so the question I've got for you is, what is like, in terms of substance, what is the best Christian atheist debate that you've seen personally?
So this is hard. So I've answered this question before, and then people are like, but hold on a second, Nate. So there's a caveat to this answer, but I was struck by the exchange between William Lane Craig and Shelley Kagan. And so that was, boy, now I'm forgetting, morality? Do you know what I'm talking about? It was
it was on morality.
Right.
It was on the atheistic grounding of morality, something like that.
Right. I found Dr. Kagan, who is a professor somewhere. So when you're 44, Cameron, the details fall out of your ears. But because it's been a while, I found him to be the most adept at answering Dr. Craig. That doesn't mean that he had the better responses substantively, but in terms of substance, I found that level of discourse to be extremely high. Now, I've been told that Dr. Craig was told behind the scenes to sort of, tie one hand behind his back, that it wasn't supposed to be a true exchange in the form of a regular debate. And then Dr. Kagan didn't follow that format. But nevertheless, I think that's an excellent exchange. I think Dr. Kagan's views are untenable, but I just thought substantively that's great. I encourage everybody to watch that video. I think it's still out there on YouTube.
Oh yeah, it's definitely still out there. I remember watching it maybe a year ago again, just to kind of listen back to it. Oh, it was when I did like 10 debates that every Christian should watch, 10 Christian atheist debates that every Christian should watch. And that was one that made it onto my list. And so I kind of rewatched it to kind of see what was going on in there. And like most people, even including most Christians, will admit that Dr. Craig lost that debate. And so that was pretty much my opinion as well, up until I rewatched it again a year ago. And I was not expecting this, because what I was really trying hard to do while I was rewatching was listen to the framing and listen to like what are the actual moves being made on each side. How is this person responding? How are they responding to that response? And so there wasn't, because this wasn't a formal debate, there wasn't a whole lot of like framing being done by the opponents. So Dr. Craig wasn't doing a whole lot of framing. Shelley Keegan wasn't doing a whole lot of framing. So you had to kind of like do it yourself, the audience. And so as I listened back, I remember thinking like, Dr. Craig did not do as bad as I initially thought. And I think maybe what caused the initial reaction or the initial assessment was that he wasn't doing his usual framing. He wasn't sort of summarizing what the other person was saying and then giving a response and helping the audience follow the dialectic that way. And so that may be part of it as I think back on it. But I don't want to say that Dr. Craig won the debate or that he came out on top. If anything, I think it was more even than a lot of people think. So like I said, a lot of people think that Keegan won that one. But as I listen back, I now have the opinion that I think it was way more even than I initially thought. And I think it does have to do with the fact that I was trying to do the work myself on the fly, listening and trying to figure out how the puzzle pieces fit together. And that can be, difficult if someone's not helping you along. So
that's right. It's funny. I've been accused of many things because atheists, watch skeptics, non-believers watch Debate Teacher Reacts, and they'll say, "I've seen 4 videos so far, and every Christian won. Therefore, you're biased." There have been many occasions where I have announced or said or judged that the Christian lost. I think, boy, man, don't get old, Cameron. That's all I can tell you. I think it was who's it? Ken Ham lost against Bill Nye, in my opinion. John Lennox lost an exchange with Richard Dawkins, in my opinion, in one of their debates. And I think, if I remember this right, so somebody's gonna have to help me. I think I said that Dr. Craig did not best Kagan. And so I think it came down, if I remember this, to missed opportunities to just give him some more pushback. I feel like he just let things sit when Dr. Kagan gave him challenges, and I know that he could have done better. I think the reason why I would say the majority of Christians win, in my estimation, is not because they're Christian. It's because they take debate more seriously than a lot of the atheist and skeptic interlocutors that go up against them. I think that, and I think Dr. Craig has said this, but I think the attitude with debate from non-believers, a lot of them, is, oh, what a cakewalk. There's nothing here. And so they don't do the homework, and it shows. So.
Okay, so that was the debate on substance. What is your favorite debate that you've watched? A Christian atheist debate in terms of substance. But now I want to switch gears and ask you, what is your favorite Christian atheist debate in terms of entertainment? And I'm actually working on a video where I'm going to be doing a sort of like 10 debates you should watch in terms of entertainment, which again is purely for entertainment purposes. So this is not what you want to watch if you're trying to learn something. But what is, like, of the debates that you've seen, what is the most entertaining debate you've watched?
So I hope you didn't, I'm sorry, I tried to pull up a video to refresh my memory. I hope the audio didn't play through there. I had I have to tell you about this debate. So entertainment value is not how I would say it. Cringe factor is probably the way that I would describe this video. It's Jeff Durbin and James White versus Greg Clark and Dan Ellis. And so
Yes. That's the guy that isn't he wearing a green shirt or something?
he's
The atheist.
Yeah, he's wearing a green
Okay.
hoodie, and he's
Okay,
all
yes.
about eating the rat poison. And at one point he gets up and he wants the Christians to guess what's inside the envelope, as if it's like Johnny Carson or something. It was so bizarre. That was the worst. I think in the video itself, it got so bad that I went away from the camera and came back with some popcorn and just started eating and watching, because it was a carnival. It was ridiculous. That's probably the best.
Was that the first time that you had watched it as you were recording?
Yeah. So
wow.
I do that.
So you didn't even know.
Yeah, I'll watch these fresh, and you're getting my fresh responses. Now, sometimes, and so this is the YouTube magic, sometimes somebody will say something and I'll have to stop and think for a second, and then I just edit that out. And so it makes it seem like I'm smarter, like, oh, I just immediately knew what to say. No, sometimes I actually do sit down and think through stuff. But yeah, that's fresh. And that was a joke. That was ridiculous, but very entertaining.
Very entertaining. And like you said, cringe is probably a really good word to use. Okay, so just a few more questions and then we'll close out the stream. So who is, in your opinion, maybe we'll put Dr. Craig aside, okay? Who is like the most skilled debater that you've seen, excluding Dr. Craig?
Boy, I feel like
I've got my answer.
Right, okay. I feel like if you ask me this question tomorrow, it'll be different, okay? So maybe that's how close this is.
What's happening tomorrow?
Well, I don't know. My mind will change. But man, the person that comes to mind is Trent Horn. Trent Horn has got to be the most, how do I say this? In terms of hitting the things that he should in a debate, which, by the way, I'm a Protestant, so I'm not a Catholic, and so there's that, right? Because that always happens. Oh, you're a this or that, so you just like these guys. No, Trent Horn, he has this respect for the way that you should do debate properly. I don't even know if I'm explaining that right. He knows what he's supposed to do, and he does it well. It doesn't mean I agree with every one of his conclusions, but for example, one of the things that we didn't even talk about this, but one of the things that you're supposed to do in terms of raising your level of ethos, right? So this is on the rhetoric side of debate, is when you start writing your contentions, when you start making arguments, you need to cite evidence to support yourself, right? Well, it serves you well to cite evidence from people who are friendly to your interlocutor's position. So for example, when William Lane Craig does this, he'll cite evidence that come from colleagues of the person that he's debating. This raises the level of argumentation when you do that. Trent Horn is somebody that does that very well. And so all the other stuff too that he does, I'm a huge fan of. James White is definitely up there, but I just, boy, yeah, maybe ask me again tomorrow. I'll say James White, because you told me not Dr. Craig. I would have said Dr. Craig, but you took that away from me, Cameron, and that makes me upset.
I took it away from you. So did you watch the Trent Horn Gavin Ortland debate on Sola Scriptura?
No, and that is planned. I plan to do a reaction on that.
So
I don't know
it fresh
Ortland
again.
at all. I don't know Ortland at all in terms of debaters. I mean, in debating, I've never seen him debate, so I don't know. Maybe he's good too. Okay,
well then we won't talk about it. I don't want to spoil anything for you. So the person that I was going to say, like of the debates that I've seen, it's got to be Inspiring Philosophy, Michael Jones.
Ooh, yeah.
Have you watched many of his debates?
No, but he murdered Aaron Ra in a debate at some bar.
Yes, that's where the 20 years comment comes from.
Okay.
Do you know the 20 years meme?
That's right. I turned that into a drinking game because I was inspired by all the drinks that were around that bar. And so my thing was in that, so I reacted to that. So if you're curious, you can You and your viewers can check that out. But what I noticed was Aaron Ra just kept asking the same question over and over again. How is Christianity not dangerous? And so then I just turned that into a drinking game. Every time he did it, I just took a sip. But yeah, that was a brutal bloodbath. I wonder, is he still alive, Aaron Ra?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Yeah, that was violence against him. Yeah, inspiring philosophy is great.
So one thing, or two things that I would suggest that you do is review both of the debates that Michael Jones has done with Matt Dillahunty. So you may not know that he's done 2 debates, but they're both worth reacting to.
You said Matt Dillahunty, and I got heartburn down here.
Oh, okay.
No, but I said that I was never going to do a Matt Dillahunty debate ever again because I did.
What
3
happened?
of them. Well, I did. I went into this cold again, not knowing who Matt Dillahunty is, not realizing that who's the what do you mean guy has coined
John
what
McRae.
Matt Dillahunty does as the Dillahunty dodge, right? I didn't know about this, so I start, and it's funny because I go to the first debate, and I forget which one it was, Mike Winger maybe, and I go, oh my gosh, that guy's my Uncle Steve. Like Matt Dillahunty looks exactly like my Uncle Steve. So I immediately have this affinity to Matt Dillahunty. I'm like, oh my gosh.
You had an affinity for him?
Well, he just looks like my family. So anyway,
okay.
Then he opens his mouth, and then I was like, oh, okay. The problem with Matt Dillahunty is he's not debating, in my opinion. And so it's just frustrating. My characterization of what he does is, well, maybe I can get your take on this, is he wears multiple hats in a debate. And so what he'll want to do when it's advantageous for him is he'll make an argument. When he gets pressed from the other side, particularly with, how does this go? His sort of epistemological criterion. When somebody says, well, how do you what counts as evidence based on your epistemological criterion? He then takes off his debater's hat and he puts on the audience's hat. And he goes, well, I'm just not convinced. That's not what your role is as a debater, is to sit back and judge the debate as an audience member and say that kind of stuff. That's ridiculous. So I saw that too many times, and I was like, I can't do it. He does this every time. So
it is kind of his shtick, and he's even sworn never to come back on Capturing Christianity. One of the things that he did on in his debate with Matt Dillahunty versus Mike Winger, one of the things that he said in that debate was that claims are not evidence. And so I made a video where I responded to that claim and made a few points, and he was not a fan. He did not like that, and then he said that he would never come back onto Capturing Christianity. But what I was going to say is that the debates that he did with Michael Jones, I think they expose a little bit more of his like sort of epistemology and methodology of the way that he approaches these discussions. And I think you're right. Like there is a way to sort of broadly outline what his approach is to these debates, which is kind of just like a skepticism, where you're anytime you get backed into a corner, you're just skeptical. And that's pretty much his approach. Like he's just going to eventually say, if some argument is presented, well, that's not good enough. Like I'm still skeptical of that. In the way that he puts it and that you put it is like, I'm not convinced. And so it is just kind of like a boring skepticism that anyone can appeal to literally in any debate, especially if you pitch the debate topic as like, is this true? And then the other person's, their job is to say whether or not it convinces them. And you can always pretty much, in philosophy, very well known, you can pretty much always be skeptical of anything. You can always apply more and more skepticism. And so it is like, it's a good like tactic if you just kind of want to stay where you're at and stay unconvinced. It's a good tactic to use. Like it's there's a reason why skepticism is still around and why people still use it. Like there's a reason why it has such a sort of stronghold, if I can use that term, that evangelical term, stronghold on people. So, I don't really have much more to say beyond that.
So what I'm hearing you say, Cameron, is that I should do one more Matt Dillahunty debate reaction?
Yeah, well, I would say two more, but if you're just going to do one, if you're just going to do one,
Yeah.
do the second debate that they had. So I think the first one, I think both of them were on. Oh no. One of them was on the Non Sequitur show when that was still around, and I think they debated whether or not Christianity was harmful, or religion is harmful, something along those lines. And basically, what Michael Jones did is what he always does: is he brought all of these studies and meta-analysis and all of the scientific data that points to the fact that no, religion is actually a force for good in the world overall, like a sort of net good. And then Matt Dillahunty like appealed to some random anecdotes and was like, oh, well, no, we can like deny the stuff through these anecdotes that I'm familiar with, or these sort of counterfactual, like these possible scenarios that we can sort of conjure up, and like that defeats your whole point. It was just very strange.
Yeah.
But the second debate that they did, I think it was on Modern Day Debate, and that one, like after the debate, I think Matt Dillahunty said that he had to go and buy himself like a gift to himself to make himself feel better. That's like how badly he did in that debate. So
well, I guess it answers your other question. If you do bad on a debate, buy yourself a gift and then you'll feel better.
Go out and spend a whole lot of money to feel better about yourself.
Yeah. I'll take your advice. I swore off Matt Dillahunty, but because Cameron Bertuzzi at Capturing Christianity said so,
Michael Jones, Matt Dillahunty.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it. I mean, even if you don't, like, you don't always have to do a video or make content out of these debates. So even if you don't make a video, it's still worth watching. And like part of it is not just to, as a Christian or like as a theist, there's always the desire to see your side win, right? Even if you're trying to combat tribalism, like there's always this sort of like, I think it's just part of human nature. But you don't have to look at this debate in that way. You can look at it like, I actually want to inform myself on the case that can be made for Christianity being a positive force in the world, and then how might an atheist respond to this? So it doesn't have to be in this sort of tribalistic framework. But all right, let's move on to just. As I said, I've got a couple more questions. I think I've got you maybe for another 20 minutes or so. So I want to turn to something that we talked about at the beginning, which is basically like the value of debate and whether or not people should even be engaging in these sorts of debates in the first place. And so we're going to get a little bit meta here. So how do you respond to the objection that debates don't actually promote intellectual virtues like truth-seeking? So this is a very common objection. I think you may even have the same type of concern here, is that there is a sort of like tribalism that exists and that kind of gets promoted in these debates. So like when you watch a debate, more often than times than not, you're going to find yourself agreeing with the person that's defending the view that you already agree with. There's always this question of like bias, and so people can get more entrenched in their views when they hear sort of counter evidence and everything. And so what do you make of like the value of debate? Do you think that there's any sense to this objection to debates, or what are your thoughts?
So when debates, this is a really great question. When debates are done well, they absolutely promote truth seeking. They absolutely do. When two learned people decide to argue to affirm and negate a particular proposition, resolution, whatever, and they are shouldering various burdens to get there, is that we all benefit from understanding the topic better. We can walk away from that more informed and make up our own minds in a more informed way. That is truth seeking in a nutshell.
Can I stop you really quick and just mention that there's a perfect example of this, and I can kind of take credit for it because it happened at the Capturing Christianity, the first conference that we did. So I don't know if you've watched this, but Trent Horn, and you already mentioned that you like him as a debater. So he debated Ben Watkins on, I think it was just sort of general theism. Have you seen that debate?
I think I started to, and I stopped. So I didn't finish it. But I think I know what you're getting at. Didn't you guys... what you do also with your debates is Ben and Trent, they exchanged their opening statements, and they were to create rebuttals based off The opening statements that they exchanged. Is that what happened?
Yes.
Yeah. That's great.
So the substance in that debate was very high, but they were also very cordial and respectful. And I think that what you're talking about is when a debate is done well, then you actually can promote the intellectual virtue of truth seeking. Like, it doesn't have to be this sort of either or. But I guess, and maybe you were going to get to this, is that unfortunately a lot of times debates are not good, But I did want to kind of mention that as like, if you've never done a reaction video on like a really good debate, again, I wasn't like a participant in the debate. I was just kind of part of it in moderating, so I can kind of take credit for it in that way. But if you have a debate, if you're looking for a debate that you can react to that, like, I think models that, then that would be a perfect debate, I think, to choose.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take a look at it. I mean, I'll try to finish it, right? Because I didn't. You know how this goes. I mean, the young kids.
Yes.
I watch movies. 1 2-hour movie. It takes me 2 weeks because I'm watching it like 6-minute increments because you just, your attention goes elsewhere. Anyway, one of the things that I might add to this, I don't want to derail, but I think this adds to the conversation, is I have an issue. So the way that debates tend to unravel for me is it's multifaceted. But one thing that I've been talking about, and I feel like I'm the only one doing it, so maybe I'm just this is only my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. One of the problems that I have with debates that do not provide true clash, because that is the goal, is resolutions that are not properly worded. And I've talked about this in other videos that I've made at Wise Disciple. But a resolution in a debate needs to be stated as a proposition. And probably the best example of this is, because I was just thinking about making a video on this, was William Lane Craig versus Andrew Pyle. The statement, or excuse me, the resolution for the debate is in the form of a question. No, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Like, the topics of debate should be stated. This is coming from a formal background. They should be stated in the form of a statement that can be affirmed by vote by the end of the debate, which oftentimes they are. They're voted for or whatever. And that's when you get this concept of affirmation on the one side and neg, which is negation on the other side. You're affirming or negating an actual statement. A lot of these topics that I see that pass off as topics for debate are so ambiguous. How are you supposed to draw out clash? Who knows what the burden of proof, where the burden of proof lies? We know that in a formal debate, burden of proof usually tends to lie with, most often than not, with the affirmation side. But that usually is the case because the topic of the debate is worded in such a manner. The William Lane Craig's debate with Andrew Pyle should have been worded, the Christian God does exist. See, all I did was I just rearranged the words around. But that's something that can actually be affirmed and then negated, and you know who has burden of proof in there. When you say, does the Christian God exist? What are you, like, they're providing answers to the questions, but you're not actually defending. You can't defend a question. You only defend statements. And so that also, in my opinion, leads to kind of the problems with debates is you don't get the true clash. Then it comes down to rhetoric. There's way more rhetorical force and persuasion that's involved. Fallacious reasoning comes in. Crowd pleasing happens a lot in debates that I see. Those are bad examples. Those are not truth-seeking debates. You gotta mind that balance of logic and rhetoric.
This is a really subtle point, and I need to make a note of it. Basically, your one of your points is that when it comes to deciding a topic for a debate, like don't do it in terms of a question, like make it in terms of a positive statement. And that way, like you said, you can get this sort of true clash.
That's right. And you know who has burden of proof. Burden of proof, that's a whole topic of conversation. But, and I'm coming from, again, high school level, college level debate, which those are more policy, right? You have two kinds of propositions when it comes to debates. Just stop me if I go too far off. But like you have what's called policy propositions and you have fact propositions. Apologetics and theology debates are fact propositions. We're talking about what is objectively true about reality. Policy propositions are like, topics for those is the United States should adopt communism as its official form of government. Okay, that is a positive statement that can be affirmed, and that means that the burden of proof rests with the AF on that. The neg has to poke holes in the contentions and the prima facie case that the AF makes for that kind of a case or whatever. But that's just not how a lot of theology and apologetics debates go. And like I said, I'm the only one who seems to have a problem with this. So maybe it's not an issue, but it's just an observation.
This actually is a good segue into one of the last questions I want to ask you, which is your thoughts on the presidential debates.
Oh my gosh.
Completely unrelated to apologetics or philosophy or anything, but what are your thoughts on these debates? Are they like completely pointless? Are they mainly for like cringe or entertainment value? What are your thoughts?
I think they're a carnival. I think the thing that's missing from presidential debates is the organ music that accompanies old school carnivals. You know what I'm saying? If you play carnival music behind the next presidential debate, trust me, it'll make so much more sense. It's a carnival. I see a lot of appealing to the crowd, a lot of emotion that goes into it. The substance is low. I think I did do a debate between Trump and Biden. So if you're curious about what happened there, I have a debate reaction on that. So these are way more. They're not formal. They're not tracking along the lines of anything that we have said today. So those are presidential debates, in my opinion.
Yeah, I suppose we should also sort of make the caveat that what we're talking about are like the contemporary, most recent presidential debates. Because what I understand, and I'm not a historian at all, or even I don't have any sort of interest in the history of politics. From what I understand, from what I hear, is that the debates back in the day actually used to be substantive and weren't filled with rhetoric, and they were way more intellectual and virtuous. But nowadays, they sort of devolved into these like, tribalistic wars and battles, and it's further distancing us apart from each other, and just, they're horrible.
I'm not going to go there, but I know so many people so many people tell me, Cameron, excuse me, Cameron. So many people tell me. It's like, cut all that out and you've got a 3-minute debate. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's a pretty good impression. Gotta say.
I got to try harder.
Excuse me, Cameron, excuse me. Okay, last question, and this is going to round it out. Actually, we did have a super chat that was sent in, so we'll get to that in just a second. Sure. But I wanted to ask you, like, what sort of resources do you recommend for people who want to be better at debate?
Yeah. So, that's a great question. So if you can imagine me coming back to, because I was a teacher a while ago. So me coming back to debate, I had to like refresh, So I pulled out all my old lesson plans. What I've discovered is there's not one singular great resource out there. I wish there was. I wish there was one book that I could say, man, it's got everything you need. But I'll give you two things. Yeah. One of them is a website. So it's nationalspeechanddebate.org. That has helped me in terms of just thinking through, because they have a lot of instructional videos on how to break down what a debate is, how to think through what flow is. They've got a lot of these things that are free. Some of it's locked up for, like, I guess you have to buy, packages where you can unlock resources. But a lot of the resources are free. And these are free PDFs. You can download them. They're written at the layman level, a lot of them. I think that's a great website there. There's another book. This is old school. And so the language is dry. But it'll break down in a methodical way the elements of debate, and it'll tell you as a debater what you should be seeking to develop if you are on the AF side, what you're supposed to be doing on the neg side. It's called Practical Argumentation. Who wrote that? Cameron, who wrote Practical Argumentation?
Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly.
I think it's we're professionals, so I'm trying to find the it's an old book, so it's like 100 years old. George Patey.
Oh, wow.
Patey. Patey.
Is
P-A-T-E-E.
it even on Amazon?
It should be. Practical Argumentation by George K. Patey. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. But like I said,
I see a different book that's by a different author on Amazon, but I could just be. Oh, there it is. I see it. It's on Amazon. Practical Argumentation by George Patty. Patty.
Yeah, Pate. Anyway, but I've read a lot of the sort of the current sort of layman books that have come out, and they're just not that great. And I feel like they try to do too much, or they veer off. Like I said, I wish there was one book that captured everything for everybody. That's probably the closest one, but it's an old book.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's also cool that it's so old. Like, I think that's one of the things that Tim McGrew and their whole crew, like, they really emphasize the importance of reading older materials. Like, you don't just have to get all of your information from like contemporary resources. And they're mainly obviously talking about in terms of apologists. Like, you can read a William Paley, you can read these other older apologists that still have really good things to contribute. You don't have to just rely on the Michael Laconas and the William Lane Craigs, and as good as they are, you don't have to just rely on those folks. And so I like the idea of recommending like an older sort of tried and true resource. That's great.
It's the Rocky IV. You know, when Drago is with the new technology and Rocky's up the mountain on the snow, that's Pate's book. It's old school.
So Brian Stevens, he's got a long... Okay, Nate Sala should check out the more recent debates where I believe he wants something testable that makes novel predictions. Does Nate have something that meets this standard for his Christian beliefs?
Well, I mean, that's outside the scope of this conversation, which is, what are my beliefs and how do I argue for them? I mean, I guess we can have that conversation. It's just that, what I do. So maybe this is hard to believe for a lot of non-believers, but what I do is try to remain objective to who is making the better arguments and who actually wins. So, I would say that the one thing that comes to mind that perhaps a lot of skeptics don't accept is that propositions are evidence for me. And that's actually not novel. That's old school. That's in terms of philosophy, that is accepted. Now, the problem with skeptics and non-believers is that they're very much taken with verificationism, or a form of verificationism wherein the only evidence that is acceptable is something that can be empirically verified. And I reject that. And I don't think there's any good reason for that. So when you open the door to propositions being a form of evidence, now all of a sudden the Kalam cosmological argument seems pretty compelling. So...
All right, let's move on to a super chat from Addison Weir. He says, Nate should react to IP versus G-Man. You're probably not familiar with G-Man.
G-Man?
But
is he a government agent?
G-Man. No, he is, I believe he's a Christian, I want to say fundamentalist, or like a young earth creationist. I don't know if he's actually young earth, but I think he really takes issue with inspiring philosophy being an evolutionist.
Okay. I'm writing this down.
I think it's something along those lines. I think it's something along those lines. It's been a while, and I don't think I watched all of that debate. So you'll just have to look it up for yourself.
Can we call IP Ip Man? Ip Man versus G Man?
Ip Man.
The dad jokes are just really bad today, Cameron.
Okay, this is just a comment that I saw earlier on in the stream that I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on. We touched on it a little bit. ATJ says debates are worthless. They are just shouting matches, and people argue ad nauseum and just go home believing the same thing they came in to the debate believing in.
Yeah, I mean, I get where that's coming from. I really do. And I've seen way too much of it. So I understand, ATJ. We're seeing this on mainstream media. We're seeing this on social media. We're seeing this in person, unfortunately. All I would offer is the kinds of debate that you and I have been talking about, Cameron, is not a shouting match at all. So what ATJ is probably referring to are what is more commonly referred to as debate in regular conversations, but aren't really debates at all. They don't follow a structure. They don't follow formal rules. There's no judging at the end of this. I would agree. If that's what is considered debate, then let's not debate. But that's not what you and I have been talking about.
Humbled Clay has an interesting comment. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Nate, write a book.
Oh my gosh.
What do you think about writing a book on debate? I'm sure it's crossed your mind.
I I appreciate the opportunity to say this because I was wondering if I would have an opportunity to say this. I have a very low, so this is not, don't hear what I'm not saying. I have a very low view of what I do. And it's not a problem necessarily. It's just that I suppose if there were more humbled clays out there who, thought that might be a good idea, I would really consider it. I'm only one. You have to understand, I'm not the only debate teacher that's ever taught debate or coached. I'm well aware that my opinions and where I'm coming from is not every debate teacher's opinion. So it's a very big venture to write a book. I would do that with all humility. And I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think so highly of myself that I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to write a book about this. But I suppose if the need was out there, I would definitely pray about it and consider it. It's funny because I have this weird relationship with debates. I kind of look at it side-eyed and wary, and then I realize the value of breaking down debates and talking about the arguments and who won. So it's a weird relationship I have with debates.
Okay, we had a really interesting question just come in, and this will be the last one that we do for today from Cactoid Jim. It says, who of the folks who have never debated each other before would you most want to see debate? For example, Horn versus Craig, and what resolution would you like to see those two clash?
Horn versus Craig might be interesting. That's a really great question. I feel like this question, Thank you, Cactoid Jim. I have to sit for a day and think about it, right? Like, Horn versus Craig is good. For the longest time, I wanted to see White versus Craig, and then that eventually happened. Maybe I can work backwards and think about that longer. But like in terms of the topic of debate, I think one of the most difficult topics to debate are the highly emotional sort of apologetics issues. The problem of evil probably being at the very top. So something related to the problem of evil. The God of the Bible is responsible for evil in the world, or something like that, or, which comes down to definition of terms, I understand. But something along the lines of the problem of evil, I think, is fascinating because I think it forces all of us to really try to draw a line of distinction between intellect and emotion, which, by the way, we are the intersection of intellect and emotion. So again, we're hitting that balance, logic and rhetoric. We need to recognize that. We need to find out where the line of distinction is. And I think that's a wonderful exercise, is dealing with something that's highly emotional. How many people have anecdotal stories about something horrific happening in their life? Everybody questions the problem of evil. I was talking to Clay Jones about this. That's like the number one problem. So something related to that. You know what I would love to see is old school. So these guys would have to come back from the dead. But maybe like Jonathan Edwards versus Bertrand Russell. Maybe that's like something interesting. I don't know what the topic would be.
I am just so underwhelmed by Bertrand Russell. When I read through his book, Why I'm Not a Christian, I was like, this is what people are excited. Like, this is the guy who people think was like a good defender of atheism. It blew my mind when I read through that. It was very surprising. I was like, it was really hard to understand why he was held in such high esteem. Now, maybe it was just that particular book just wasn't that great. Or I don't know. Maybe there's some other stuff that he's done that he's been really good at.
I would say, as a sort of an addition to my interests and hobbies, quantum physics has always been so fascinating to me. I would have loved to have been at the Solvay conference in the 1920s, where they were debating Copenhagen and perhaps, various interpretations of quantum physics, because I know that Copenhagen is sort of this is way off topic, but like I know Copenhagen is sort of the popular view and understanding and interpretation of quantum physics, but like, man, to be a fly on the wall and hear these guys go at it, that would have been great. Although I heard that it was underwhelming, how it was handled at Solvay. Anyway, sorry about that.
Yeah, one of the debates that I would like to see that hasn't happened and probably will never happen, unfortunately, is have you ever heard of Alexander Pruss?
Yes.
He's a philosopher. P-R-U-S-S.
S-S. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, S-S. Yeah, the reason why he's not as well known is because he doesn't really do public interviews or debates or anything. And so you kind of only know about him in his writing, basically. And he is a professor, so he does like teach classes, and he's got students and everything. So people that work with him and know him as a professor and stuff, they know how brilliant he is. He does have a blog, so that is like a sort of public medium that he uses. But I would love to see a debate between Alex Pruss and Graham Oppy on just generic theism, like, does God exist? If you don't know who Graham Oppy is, for anyone watching, Graham Oppy is like probably the most, in terms of like contemporary atheists, he's probably the smartest atheist philosopher that's alive and doing work on philosophy of religion. So Graham Oppy versus Alexander Pruss, and Alexander Pruss is basically like the theist version of that. So he's like the smartest Christian philosopher that's currently working on philosophy of religion. So that's why personally I would love to see those two in at least a dialogue. Like, I don't even think that I would need to see like a formal debate between the two of them. However, a dialogue might not be that productive because Graham Oppy is very, and I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way. I'm sure it will. He's very pedantic. So he's very, let me put it this way. He's very detail oriented. So there was a conversation I hosted between him and Ed Fazer on Capturing Christianity years ago. And the second debate that I hosted, they had two discussions on my channel. So the second discussion was, again, just kind of on God's existence, whether or not there's like a good argument for God's existence. And so the first, I think, 45 minutes to an hour, if I'm remembering this correctly, was basically Ed and Oppy going back and forth on whether or not we should even be using arguments, like the value of argumentation in general. And so that can kind of give you like a taste of like, as much as I'd like to see them clash, like philosophers, especially in the analytic tradition, like there's a lot of detail, and which is a good thing. And you don't want to miss that stuff, but they'd probably need at least like a month of dialogues, like for hours a day, for them to make much progress. But,
probably.
Yeah. I mean, that's a conversation I would love to see.
Pruss and Oppy, man. I mean, if anybody can make that happen, maybe it's you.
We'll see. Pruss may eventually change his mind and start to do more public things, but for the time being, he's turned down invites, and he turns down invites from my friends and other people that are doing this sort of thing. So it seems very unlikely that he'll do something like this. There was something that came out recently. He did a debate with another Christian on whether there are any animals in heaven, and I haven't watched it yet, but that was posted to YouTube. So that strikes me as like maybe
the door's
a step
open
in that direction. The door may be open a little bit, but we'll just have to see. That was at a school, and it was with two professors, and so it wasn't necessarily like a public thing for some random Christian YouTuber. But anyways, that's what I would love to see.
A surefire way to get him on your show. This always works. You send him an email, and then you say, "Do you know who I am?" And then that works. I'm Cameron Bertuzzi. Come on, man.
I'll try that next time. I'll just send him an email. Do you know who I am?
Let me know how that goes.
Do you know? Okay. I'll send you a text. Well, Nate, it's been awesome to have you on. I mean, I feel like we're old friends. We could talk about this stuff forever, and I'd love to have you back on. We can talk about some more stuff. Maybe you know what would be fun? I just had this idea. What if we did a debate reaction live on Capturing Christianity?
All right. Yeah, that's great. That's a great idea. Let's do it.
That'd be fun. And we'd have to find a debate that both of us haven't seen, which may actually work if we do, if we watch a live debate that's like coming up. What if something like that? That might be cool. I don't know of any like big debates that are coming up soon, other than I know that the Trent Horn versus Gavin Ortland debate just happened, but just an idea for the future. It'd be fun to do like a live reaction to something like that. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Cool.
Yeah, let's do it.
Get some popcorn.
Right. Guess what's in the envelope?
Sit back and relax. All right. Well, Yeah, Nate, it's been great to have you on. Thanks for coming on. Again, go check out his channel, Wise Disciple. I've got it linked in the description of this video. Nate, is there anything you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope that if you come to the channel that you are blessed and that there's valuable resources there. If you are a Christian and you have or you are around 16 to 22, I definitely invite you to come out to Summit Ministries, which is what I currently work for right now. You get 2 weeks of full-on training from the best of the best, Jay Warner Wallace, Frank Turek, all those guys. For more information, you can hit me up at my email, hello@wisedisciple.org. So anyway, shameless plug.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in today. Hopefully you got something out of this. And if you are considering doing some debates, maybe you got some tips and tricks that you can use. And I'll see you guys in the next Capturing Christianity video. So as always, see you very soon. Later. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super, super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really, really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have hundreds, literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally, this is how I feed my family. So if you see value in the work that I do, please consider supporting this ministry and becoming a patron. Links to that are in the description. Oh, and have I mentioned that Christianity is true?